Welcome to a very, very special live. This commemorates 250 videos for Masai basketball. We've been around for a little over a year. We've pissed off a lot of people. We've had a lot of controversial things to say. And I wanted to take a moment, really, to talk about a few things that were on my mind. First, I want to talk about a potential mistake that the Raptors are potentially about to make. I want to talk about the 10 types of NBA defenders. I want to take a quick look back, a very brief look back at some of the things that we've been talking about on this channel and how they've either panned out or not panned out. And at the end of this video, if you stick around till the end, I'm going to offer you a heartfelt olive branch to those of you who've disagreed with me, to those of you who have maybe felt my style to be condescending, abrasive, or just outright dickish. And I want to talk about the Toronto Raptors because I feel that the Toronto Raptors have a chance right now to right a ship that has been going the wrong direction for quite some time. And I would hate to see something as silly as what might just be about to happen screw it all up. So if you're new to this channel, naturally this is going to be a little informative. If you're a lifer, if you're someone who's been following us all year, feel free to skip ahead 3-4 minutes when you're watching this later on. As always, my name is Robert. Grab your coffee. This is 4:43 in the morning, and I'm assuming most of you are probably going to catch this on your way to work, or you're going to catch this up as you're waking up. So by all means, grab your coffee, or as our new head coach, Darko Rajakovic, likes to say, grab your espresso, and let's get going with this one. So first of all, gotta say thank you. Thank you to the people who have supported this channel. 250 videos is a lot of videos. It's a lot of lives. Some of these videos were quick hitters, right? Some of these videos, like my interview with Scotty's trainer, they meant so much to me. I can't even tell you how much they meant to me. Some of these videos took a lot of time. Honestly, the Blake Murphy thing meant a lot to me too. It was really cool to talk to him. Some of these videos just took a ton of time. A good example of a video that took a ton of time is the Honest trailer. And if you have not checked that out, where is it? The Toronto Raptors are hilarious. Definitely check that video out. Some of these videos were controversial. They cost some subscribers, like, hey, Will Barton is not the answer. Or who could forget? Probably the most infamous video and most commented video in this channel's history, which was that Pascal Siakam is not a superstar. That was not popular. There were a lot of low-light videos. There were a lot of really good takes. There were some takes that didn't work out too. There was the Otto Porter can change the Raptors title hopes. He didn't play. Played 8 games. I really thought he was going to be great. There was a video about how Precious Achiuwa was on the verge of having a breakout season, and he struggled. There was a video about, early in training camp when we were all fuming off of the Rico Hines, hype run, that the Raptors could be contenders this year. I thought they had a chance. There were really informative videos that took a really long time to put together, like the real reason most draft picks fail, or the 10 NBA myths. I loved those videos. There were videos about prospects that I really feel dug deep into what I liked about these prospects, like Christian Koloko, is too smart to be a rookie, or Scotty Barnes is a Marvel superhero. And these started a trend of low light and highlight videos in which I did film breakdowns, and I really enjoyed those videos. Then there were the lives. And man, at one point, I tell you, when we were about 120 videos in, or 100 videos in, maybe 90 videos in, I didn't think we would ever do a live. I didn't think that was in this channel's future. But I did one and I was hooked. And I tell you, from the very first one, which we got to go way back. As you can see, we've done a lot of lives. Hero Ball kills the Raptors again. Scotty Barnes criticism. a lot of talk about how the Raptors were going the wrong way, how the ball wasn't moving, the ball was sticking too much, guys were padding stats, guys were, getting selfish assists, guys were freezing their teammates out, guys weren't getting along. And there was a really strong momentum going into the trade deadline that I really felt that the Raptors needed to hit the reset button and just tear this whole thing down and tank. And then we didn't. And this video was when I found out live, as my big reaction went on to Reddit, as someone said the Raptors just traded for Jakob Poeltl. During the video called the Raptors about to make a huge mistake, in which I screamed "fuck" very loud. And then I graded the trade a D, and people were not happy about that either because of net ratings. And then I started to get really vocal. I mean, there was a video earlier on which I did with Leo Bias for the Sacramento Kings, in which we openly talked, I believe for the first time in the internet or on the internet, and openly criticized Rico Hines and talked about how what he was experiencing as a Sacramento Kings fan is exactly what I'm experiencing now as a Toronto Raptor fan. And there was only one common link. It was a bit of a witch hunt. There's a little bit of correlation, causation. Maybe some people were upset about that. But today, when Rico Hines decided to go to Philadelphia, I heard a lot of those talking points being echoed back. And I don't remember where it all started, but I have a feeling it was here. I talked very openly about the Raptors needing to free Jeff Doughton. I openly joked that I was the president of the Free Jeff Doughton camp. Again, I haven't hit 100. I said Paolo was not a great pick and that I would have taken Jabari Smith. And I'm sure if I said that to an NBA analyst, they'd say, "Where are your credentials? Take him back." I said Joe Wieskamp would be awesome, and then he proceeded to miss every single shot he took for the rest of the season. Just like anyone who covers the NBA, I'm not batting 100, and I am not pretending that I bat 100, but it has been a little bit bittersweet to see where the Raptors ended up this season, to see now, to have Masai Ujiri at the trade deadline say we've been a little selfish, then at the post, when the Raptors got bounced in the play-in, for him to say we were selfish, and today to hear Bobby Webster say the Raptors were stat padding. This is the first time that I have ever heard. I've been following this team for 22 years. This is the first time in Raptors history that I have ever heard a general manager, a very good general manager, mind you, openly call his team out for stat padding. It's one thing to say we were a little selfish. It's another thing to say we were stat padding and playing for contracts. I'm very proud to say, I'm very proud of Bobby Webster for admitting that. Raptors Twitter was not too happy with Bobby Webster. They want him fired. They think he's not a good GM. I disagree. But there was a time today when I decided, okay, Rob, you need to actually start listening to what Raptor fans are talking about right now, because, outside of this community, there's a lot of conversations that go on. They go on small channels, small communities all over the internet, but they also go on bigger channels that are bigger than ours. And I just wanted to read and get a pulse of what are Raptor fans feeling right now? Where are Raptor fans on certain topics? Well, here's what I think Raptor fans feel today, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that most Raptor fans believe that Pascal Siakam is not a superstar. I feel a little bit vindicated on that one because that was one of my really big points. I feel most Raptor fans still have faith that Scottie Barnes can become something good, but I don't think most of them are as high on him as I am. I think maybe most people believe that his upside is closer to an Andre Iguodala than a Magic Johnson or a Kawhi Leonard. I get that. I don't agree with you, but I get why you feel that way. He did not have a great year. I think most Raptor fans, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm in the wrong crowd, maybe I'm on the wrong forums, would welcome a Fred VanVleet departure. This certainly was not the case to start the season. Couldn't even imagine that. I think most Raptor fans are really happy that Nick Nurse is gone. I have yet to find two people having a positive discussion about Nick Nurse in the wake of his firing. I think most Raptor fans are fairly optimistic about Darko's hiring and like the stuff that he's been talking about. I think most Raptor fans see that there is some potential of some of the younger players on this roster, like Delano Banton, Christian Koloko, Precious Achua, Malachi Flynn, Jeff Doughton, Ron Harper Jr. But I think they would also agree that none of these guys project to be all-stars, superstars, or blue chip prospects that would be anything considered lottery talent. I think that there might be a minority, but it could be a pretty sizable minority among Raptor fans who believe that because Nick Nurse was fired, that all the problems are going to go away. I heard some pretty credible people talking about that today. I heard some very not so credible people talking about it today as well. So it seems that this is what has unified both sides. The bad man is gone. Bad Nick Nurse is gone. Took Rico Hines with him. Now Fred and Pascal can finally go back to being the team players that they've always been. Let me tell you something. On Raptors Republic, I listened to a very nice conversation between Samson Folk, Eric Green, and Blake Murphy, in which they talked about the ridiculous nature of projecting how great an assistant coach will be as a head coach. Okay? I'm going to pull this off the screen just so it's not distracting you guys. All right? They talked about how can we possibly know what a Sergio Scariolo would do as a head coach? We've never seen it. Forget the fact that he's coached, the Spanish national team and coached, world over. It doesn't really matter because he's never been an NBA head coach, right? How do we know what a Jordi Fernandez will do? You're going to go on G League stuff? That's ridiculous. You can't know what Darko Rajakovic is going to do based on what he did in Tulsa and what he did for Red Star Belgrade or what he did as an assistant in Memphis. Oh, no. It is a really big deal that now he is the head coach and he's not an assistant coach and he doesn't have Taylor Jenkins telling him what to do. He has to be the decider. And now Darko is going to crumble and cry under a desk and he's not going to know what to do because he's been coaching for 27 years. Look, I get it. You want to take the sensible middle road and I get it. But let me tell you where this argument breaks apart for me. We will agree that Sergio Scariolo, Nate Bjorkgren, and all of these people played a part in winning the Raptors the NBA championship. Would you agree? Or would you disagree? I, maybe controversially, would argue that Dwayne Casey also played a part in winning the Raptors the championship. I would agree that Jama, Patrick Mutombo, I would agree that Alex McKechnie, I would agree that Jamal Magloire. You want to go down the list? DeMar DeRozan, Norman Powell. How many people would you say were responsible for the NBA championship? It's a lot of people. I think Jeremy Lin is partially responsible for the NBA championship. I think Patrick McCaw is partially responsible for the NBA championship. Would you agree or disagree with that? I think there's a lot of people. Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, Teresa Dan. Like there's so many people that are responsible for an NBA championship. But would you agree that certain people are more responsible than others? Can we be real for a second here? Can we agree that if you were kind of missing Norman Powell, you might have still had a chance, maybe. But if you were missing Kawhi Leonard, you'd probably get bounced in the second round. Like, can we agree that that's probably true? Can we agree that Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet did not play equal parts in winning that championship? Can we agree that Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka were not equally important? Can we agree that Pascal Siakam and Scott, and I don't know, Kawhi Leonard were not equally important? Okay, we can agree with that, right? Because obviously, if you have the ball more, you're going to make more decisions. If you're on the court more, you're going to impact the game more. So a guy who played 40 minutes a game for an NBA champion and had the ball for 32% usage is going to have a significantly greater drastic impact and therefore deserves more credit and more blame based on the outcome. We can agree with that, right? Absolutely. Well, here's my question. To those of you who pound your chest and say, well, Rob, Fred VanVleet is an NBA champion. Sergio Scariolo is an NBA champion. Jama is an NBA champion. Nate Bjorkgren is an NBA champion. Yes, the same Nate Bjorkgren is an NBA championship coach who went and flamed out in Indiana in 1 year and was unceremoniously fired amidst rumors of being unshakably frustrating to deal with. That same guy has an NBA championship ring. But we can agree that he was not the coach, right? He was the assistant coach. So that's my question, right? You say a guy is an NBA champion and then boo. None of us can say anything more about that, right? You understand the logical fallacy here? A guy came off the bench, shot 10% for an entire series. For up to him, you probably get swept in that series. Other people put together a Herculean effort. Kawhi basically broke his body in round 2 and 3 to get you through that. Everyone wants to talk about, KD got injured. Y'all wouldn't have won a championship. I think the Raptors had one of the hardest roads to an NBA championship in recent memory. I cannot think of a team that had a harder road than them. They faced a spry and capable Orlando Magic team in the opening round, which probably was not a team that would have scared you. In the second and third round, they faced 2 contenders. And in the third, in the final round, they faced a dynasty who had some injury issues. The Raptors also had injury issues. They were missing one of their top 8 guys in OG Anunoby. Kawhi Leonard was walking on one leg. Do we remember this? I don't want any asterisks next to that championship, but I also don't want any sort of communistic viewpoint that all players were equally responsible for that championship. They were not. So if you were not in charge of the NBA championship, how are you any more proven to be in charge of a contending team than Sergio Scariolo or Nate Bjorkgren? I don't think I need to make this point any further. Fred VanVleet was an assistant player on that team. He was a bench player. Pascal Siakam was an assistant player. I don't think any person who walked into that team would have confused Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet as being leaders of that team. So I want to know why winning a championship as not a leader means you can lead a championship organization. It doesn't. I'm not taking anything away from them. I'm not saying that they're not good players. They're great players. They're really great players. They're both all-stars. One of them has made 2 All-NBA teams. But I am saying that leadership and scoring 25 points are not the same thing. I heard a take today that nearly made me spit out my coffee. Do you want to hear it? I heard that Fred VanVleet played selfishly because Nick Nurse told him to. I heard that Pascal Siakam dominated the ball because that's what Nick Nurse wanted him to do. And then I heard Bobby Webster say that some guys were chasing stats and playing for contracts. And then, you start to wonder who those guys were. Was it Gary Trent Jr., who everyone is just ready to throw away with the bathwater right now because he doesn't fit Vision 6'9"? Kind of a sidebar here. Do y'all remember Raptors Digest video where I went on and debated very heavily that Gary was not a great defender when everyone was saying he's a really great defender, and now everyone just openly admits that he's a terrible defender, and I don't remember receiving a single apology for that because everyone told me for an entire year straight that I was absolutely out of my mind and that he was getting steals and he was a great defender. Where does this switch happen? I'm not demanding an apology, but I want a little acknowledgement. Is that okay? Is that egotistical? Does that make me unlikable? And now I like Gary, and y'all are ready to throw him away again. I like him because I'm willing to change my mind about people when they show me something different. Right? I think that it would be a colossal mistake for the Raptors to assume that the players who were leading your locker room are blameless in how last year went. And I think we as fans would be quite ridiculous and fairly stupid and very ignorant to say that because Nick Nurse is gone and the staff is going to be different, that everything is going to change. There's always a residue of losing. And the Raptors have lost a lot of games over the last 3 years. Those habits do not go away. I am very happy that Rico Hines is gone. There's nothing personal against Rico Hines. I have a lot of respect for his basketball legacy. UCLA runs are a thing of legends, okay? But he is an old school coach with an old school mindset towards basketball, and I do not like it. In 2021, 2022, when we entered the season, the role that Fred VanVleet was assigned in training camp was as a de facto third option behind OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. He was the third option, potentially the fourth option if Gary was hot. That did not last. Because Pascal Siakam was out, OG Anunoby struggled, Scotty Barnes was a rookie, and Fred VanVleet decided it was his turn to be an all-star. Do you think Nick Nurse told him to do that? You know, I heard Nick Nurse say a lot, like, be aggressive, but I don't think I've ever heard Nick Nurse say, be selfish. I mean, the man had flaws. He was a flawed coach, and we are all flawed as human beings. But can we please stop blaming him? He was not the boogeyman. He did not do everything wrong. He was also a genius on a lot of senses. You know, there's a lot of things that Darko Rajakovic is going to do that are going to remind you a hell of a lot of what Nick Nurse did, and you're going to be like, oh, this is so new. It's not that new. Nick Nurse, the person, and Nick Nurse, the coach, need to be distinguished from each other because it's not the same. It's not the same thing. Okay. He has leanings as a human being that maybe rub some people the wrong way. He has a way of talking to people and maybe communicating with people that probably rub people the wrong way. He's also been here for 5 years. That might have, you know, just the voice wears out. I get that. I understand that. Losing is frustrating. They went through COVID together. I think a lot of people broke up after COVID. Wouldn't you agree? Nick Nurse is not a bad coach. And Nick Nurse is not responsible for Fred VanVleet being selfish. Because when we walked into 2021, 2022, Fred VanVleet was supposed to be a third option. When we walked into 2022, 2023, as per every single report, including Fred VanVleet's own mouth, there was a plan that he was going to be off the ball. There was a plan that he was going to allow Scotty and Pascal to initiate the offense more. And Pascal Siakam got injured, and it was the same thing all over again. And he continued to struggle, and he shot terribly from the field, and he just kept betting on himself. You think Nick Nurse told him to do that? I mean, I don't doubt that Nick Nurse allowed him to do that. I don't doubt that. But I also believe that Fred VanVleet is a highly manipulative person. And I also believe that if you do not allow the backups behind you to flourish, if you always stifle their growth, that the person in charge of playing time is not going to really have any other options, because the offense is going to crater every time you leave the floor. And it's not going to take a genius to figure out that you playing 40 minutes might be the only option. During the Raptors Republic podcast, they talked about something that I'm going to get into a little bit more, which is roster balance. How, despite a godly net rating for the Raptors starting five of OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, Fred VanVleet, despite that lineup having very good net rating, which we've all talked about, the best in the NBA from the trade deadline onward, that they did not close many games for good reason, because it's a very flawed five-man unit. And I get that too. I think they played 4 meaningful minutes. Yeah. And that, you know, there was some notion that perhaps in a playoff series against a halfway decent coach, that lineup would have been exposed badly. And I agree with that too. But here is what is never talked about. Well, it was touched on in the pod that the bench unit didn't work, Gary, Precious, etc. Here's what would have worked. Fred VanVleet to the bench. That would have worked. Fred VanVleet on the bench for Gary Trent Jr. in the starting lineup. Your team would have worked. Would he have allowed himself to go to the bench? I don't think so. I don't think he would have allowed it. Scotty Barnes to the bench, probably also could have worked. Scotty Barnes to the bench, Gary Trent in the starting lineup could have worked. But maybe someone in the front office decided that for a branding perspective, that also wouldn't work. There's all sorts of pieces that just don't fit together, right? We talk about the odd synergy of a Scotty and a Jakob Poeltl, where ever since Jakob Poeltl was acquired, all of Scotty's short roll stuff went away. All the screening greatness that we were seeing in January went away. Okay, we talk about the awkward fit of Pascal Siakam and Scotty Barnes. They occupy all the same places on the court. They have so many similar strengths and weaknesses. Look at their, crafted analytics model. It's like everything is the same with those guys, and I don't agree with that, but I get it. I understand that they may not be the most optimal fit. What about OG and Scotty? I think there's more of a synergy there, but we can argue they're not the most ideal teammates. And then, of course, there's Fred VanVleet and Scotty Barnes, two guys who ideally need the basketball. You know what would have made this offense better? Scotty having the ball more. Do you know why? It's not because he's a really great passer, which he is, by the way. His passing is, if you understand the numbers on his passing, it is unquestionable that he is the best passer on this team in terms of advantage generation. And if you want proof on that, definitely go check out Samson's piece on Scotty's passes this year. It was a brilliant piece, and it really broke down his passes and the types of passes he gets. It's also not uncommon knowledge to know that a player who cannot shoot very well should have the ball more than players who can shoot well. Fred can space for Scotty. Scotty cannot space for Fred. That is the equation here. And ultimately, at some point, when Fred VanVleet went on his press tour and I lost my mind doing one live a day talking about how he's the worst person on earth, I seem to remember Fred VanVleet saying that he struggled off the ball, that it just wasn't working for him, that the team was struggling, and he just had to take over, and it was just the right thing to do. And it wasn't. It was never the right thing to do because it completely screwed up Scotty's game, and I think it screwed up the team dynamic. He made that choice 2 years in a row, and you want to re-sign him? James Welsh saying Scotty needs to improve his ball handling to be a point guard. I thoroughly disagree. Scotty played a lot of effective minutes at point guard last year, and I do believe that if you set screens for him the way that they were setting screens for Jakob Poeltl, he is more than capable. He is not a turnover prone player. He sees right over the defense, creates all sorts of matchup issues on switching. There aren't any point guards in the league that can guard him in the post. There's all sorts of problems. He's a great transition playmaker. He's getting better at the ball handling stuff. It got a lot better this year. He was evolving as a shooter earlier in the season, and then just dip, and we saw the three-point shooting just go downhill in a slew of injuries. I don't think Scotty was right for most of last year, but I do know that when he was right, he was great at initiating the offense. All of those dominant fourth quarters against Milwaukee and whatever, that was great. Brooklyn, who was bringing the ball up the court against Brooklyn? Sizing up Ben Simmons 40 feet from the basket and blowing past him and finishing over Kevin Durant. I seem to remember that was Scotty Barnes. Apparently his handle is tight enough to get past Ben fucking Simmons and Kevin Durant. I think it's tight enough to get past the average defender in the NBA. I'm not saying it's hot sauce. I'm not saying it's sizzle. I'm not saying it's as tight as even a Keontae George coming into the draft this year, but I am saying it's definitely tight enough, and he is definitely careful enough with the basketball. He had a lot of ball handling responsibilities throughout his first 2 years, and I don't remember a single game where he was particularly turnover prone except for maybe one. So I don't agree with that at all. I do agree that it becomes a little bit predictable when the guy with the ball can't really make you pay for going under the screen. But he's also big enough and his strides are long enough that if you have proper spacing around someone like Scotty Barnes, I truly believe he could have been like a 3 to 4 box plus minus guy on really solid stats this year. And I hope that Darko Rajakovic can see that as well. And I hope that the Raptors brass still believe that. But people seem to be hell-bent on what James is saying here. Scotty's not a point guard. He's a point forward. I assure you, you will find a lot of consensus in Fred VanVleet's camp on that take as well, because a lot of people in his life seem to believe that Scotty's not a point guard either. I thoroughly disagree with them, and I disagree with you. But we can agree to disagree. I think it is perhaps human nature to try to find something to blame, someone to blame. We often look for tormentors or a single avatar or a single source of our frustrations, right? You ever notice men who are deeply unsuccessful usually are torturers to their families because they can't really vent at work, can they? They can't really complain to their boss. They can't really do anything with their career. They're deeply dissatisfied. And so they come home and they take it out on their family and they're assholes. I think a lot of people, took out their frustrations with this team on a person who was calling that team out on a nightly basis. I'm not trying to be coy and I'm not trying to be catty or pretentious. I'm just trying to call it as I see it. And I believe in being honest. And I believe that that's exactly what happened. I think there were a lot of people who were living in la la land and wanted to believe that Fred and Pascal had one way that the story was going to go. This, the young upstart, undrafted and late first round gem were just going to blossom into the next Kyle and DeMar, and it just doesn't happen that way because Kyle and DeMar are very special people and they're very different types of leaders. And maybe Fred and Pascal, you can open yourself up to the possibility that they are not those types of leaders because leadership is not for everyone. I never heard a press conference from Pascal Siakam or Fred VanVleet that made me think they were great leaders. I think they're both hard workers. I think they're both really good people. I think they're both really great community leaders and community people and charitable and about the right stuff. And I'm sure that they're really good family men. This is not a blanket attack on their character. Please understand that leadership is a skill set. It is not for everybody. And they are not willing to defer to Scotty Barnes or Otto Porter or anyone else you might bring in to fill that leadership void. For them, this is a crown and they have earned it. First option. You think Pascal Siakam is going to sit here and watch you try to develop Scotty Barnes as a first option when he's going into a contract year? Please be real with yourself. One of the most frequently repeated statements on this channel is when people show you who they are, believe them. Nick Nurse did something that Darko Rajakovic does in a very different way. Darko believes in playing with swagger. Have you noticed that? Swagger. The Memphis Grizzlies had a little too much swagger this year for some people, but they did play with a lot of confidence, and confidence is great. You want to play free. So one of the most understated parts about basketball is nerves, anxiety, mental. It's all about the mental. We talk about Mamba mentality all the time. Jamal Murray, I really appreciate the fact that in the finals he opened up, that everything was tight. All of his shots were short, that his legs were sort of tingling. He had to calm his nerves down because he wanted to win so bad. And sometimes when you want to win so bad, the nerves can get the better of you. Here's a fun stat, since some people like to come to this channel for stats. There are 2 players in NBA history who have career averages of at least 50% field goal percentage, 40% free throw percentage, 3-point percentage, and 80% free throw percentage. Can you guess who those 2 people are? I'll wait. Guess them. Anyone. Alvin Williams. Nope. I didn't say Raptors history. I said NBA history. So let me repeat the question and I'll type it out. 2 players in NBA history in the 50, 40, 80 club. Curry and Nash. Nope. We're going to consider this a 2-minute break while you guys figure this out. Man, tell me somebody of the 70 people watching this know this. Career-wise? Yeah, career. Nope. I'm just going to keep waiting. Ding, ding, ding. We got one. Billy said Kawhi. That's one. Kawhi is one. Who is the other? Nope, it's not Larry Bird. It's not Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, 40% three-point shooting? You crazy? I'm just going to show you. I just want to say, for the number of times that I may have disappointed you, you have officially disappointed me. Sorry, guys. All right, hang on. Now, if perchance I am wrong about this, I am going to cry on air. Hang on. But I'm pretty sure I'm right. Hang on. Yes, yes, and yes. Thank God I'm right. Okay. Okay. I have double confirmed I am right. Thank God. So Kawhi is one. Luigi T asking, what's the question? I said there are two players in NBA history who have 50% field goal percentage, 40% three-point percentage, and 80%. Oh, shoot. In the playoffs. That is the caveat. In the playoffs. Y'all are taking so long to answer this question. I got to tell you. Let me give you a hint. Maybe that would have been helpful. Here's your hint. Did you get the hint? I'm a fun guy saying Malcolm Brogdon. Get the... Yo, you kidding me? Thank you. Two players in NBA history, Nikola Jokic and Kawhi Leonard. What do those two guys have in common? What do those two guys have in common? No nerves. They play with zero anxiety. You know who else plays with zero anxiety? Scotty Barnes. Trust me on this one. If you believe anything I've ever told you, please believe this. If you make a deep playoff run, Scotty will not disappear. Scotty will absolutely beast in a way that you will have to reevaluate everything you thought he could ever be. Because in those high leverage moments when people choke, he will not choke. In those high leverage moments when someone can't hit 2 free throws, sorry, that was a bit of a shot at Pascal Siakam, my bad. He will hit all 3 free throws. That tough, bend but don't break mentality, it's not for everybody. That's what leadership's about, yo. And, it's ironic to me that Kawhi and Nikola Jokic were both very overlooked prospects. One fell to 15 in the draft. One fell all the way to the 40s. Drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. What does it tell you? It tells you that sometimes people are just different mentally. That's leadership, isn't it? Isn't it? That's at least some part of leadership. Being able to show up clutch for your team. I think that's important. I don't even remember why I brought that up, but I thought it was a really interesting stat. And I wanted you to just think about how weird Kawhi and Jokic are relative to most people. The nerves, they get the best of you. And it helps when you have a leader that calms them down. I guarantee you that Nick Nurse, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam are people who have a lot of nerves in big moments. And I've watched it over and over and over that they lose their cool, they lose their composure. Fred less so, Pascal more so, Nurse definitely. And it really helps when, when you're on a plane and you get a little bit of turbulence. I'm sure to anyone who's been on a plane and has experienced turbulence, there's always that one guy in the aisle who's like, oh my God, we're going to die. That guy, first of all, to women out there, do not date that man and procreate with him. We don't need any more of those people. Number one. Number two, that is not the guy that you want leading your company, and that is not the person you want on the bench with you when you're down 3 with his oh my God energy. You don't want that. You want cool people. I say this as someone who was an oh my God anxious kid. I tell you, I was. My heart was going a mile a minute. If the game was on the line, I was like, I grew up different than who I am now. It's taken a long time for me to change. I don't panic anymore. I am a lot more stoic than I used to be. Those are qualities you really do look for in leaders, though. Stoicism is a really big part of leadership for me. Composure, keeping your composure when things are tough, coming through in tough moments, that builds strength and camaraderie. I don't think if you give Scotty Barnes the keys to this franchise that you will be a really bad team. I said it once before, I said if Scotty Barnes was drafted to Detroit, he would be in jail because he would have probably killed somebody because he couldn't take all that losing. He couldn't take the losing culture. Scotty's not a loser. And if you give him the ball and you let him make more decisions with the basketball, sure, he may not magically learn how to shoot overnight and his handle won't become as great as you want it to be right away, but you will win more games than you expect. I guarantee it. Anyway. James making a very coherent point saying, I will wait for the future before I talk about it as fact. Well, this is what we're doing, right? We're talking right now about takes. We're talking about takes because there are certain people out here who believe that, Nick Nurse is gone. Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam can be fundamentally different people. But I think the question to ask is not whether they can be fundamentally different people. I don't think that they need to be. I think the question that needs to be asked is whether they would accept fundamentally different roles. Because if they would not accept fundamentally different roles, and the roles that they currently occupy are not roles that they are suited for, then what the fuck are we doing? That's the question to ask. This is not an anti-Fred, anti-Pascal pod. Please understand that. I understand that I've developed a bit of a bad rep, and I'll deal with that at the end. Now, to something a little bit more informative. Been a lot of talk about player types. Raptors have all power forwards. Everyone on the Raptors is a power forward except for Fred VanVleet, and that's why it doesn't work. There's also been a lot of talk about the defense. Nick Nurse was a very aggressive defensive coach. Yes, he was. That, some of the Raptor schemes may not work, etc. Without him, disagree. But let's talk about, and look, analytics are very noisy when it comes to defense, right? Defensive box plus minus, all sorts of these, the crafted model, versatility index, and all that stuff, matchup difficulty, distance traveled on defense. It's all a little bit noisy, right? Field goal percentage against, noisy. Defense is a team thing. It has to work on a string. Even the worst teams, it has to work on a string. We just saw a team with a supposedly horrible defender in Nikola Jokic and another horrible defender in Jamal Murray. And I don't think anyone is arguing that those guys are great defenders by any means. But it worked. It worked well enough. You put some guys around them, Bruce Brown, KCP, Christian Brown, and it worked. Aaron Gordon, can't forget about Aaron Gordon. You draft some young upstart kid like Peyton Watson who could develop for you, who was sneaky kind of good this year. And I really love that guy. You have 2 future second round picks coming up this year due to that trade that they made. They'll be able to shore this up. But how are you able to stay afloat and win an NBA championship with 2 supposedly bad defenders on the court? Because defense is not an individual thing. It's a team thing. A team can, in theory, make it work with most defenders. I will argue that there are certain defenders, however, that will single-handedly crater your defense if they do not buy into defense. But I do not believe that there is any player in the NBA who is so bad on defense that their presence alone could tank your defense. It must be their presence combined with their lack of buy-in, combined with their role being a misfit in a certain role. There's so many things, let me just provide a little bit of context for the defensive conversation when we get into the 10 types of defenders right after. This won't be a super long live, don't worry. We're hitting up to 5:27. I want to wrap this up before 6 a.m. because I do want to get to sleep. There's so many non-negotiables when you have Pascal and Fred, right? They're going to be the guys who are going to take the shot at the end. One of those two guys is going to be the guy to make the decision unless Scotty heats up and has his 15-point fourth quarter. They're going to be your highest paid players for the foreseeable future. They're going to be your quote-unquote leaders. They're going to be the people who lead your locker room in terms of conflict, right? So when you do have tough times, they're the ones who are going to be tasked to find solutions. And more often than not, they are the ones who are going to be preserved most on defense, which means that everyone else has to fit around them on offense and defense. This is a problem. Just imagine, once again, imagine if you decided before hiring a head coach that you were going to hire 5 assistants that were non-negotiably going to be there, and then you tried to look for a head coach who was cool with the 5 assistants that you picked. You would drastically reduce the number of viable candidates you had for the head coach job, right? There's a reason why you pick your head coach first and then build a staff around him or her, right? Well, it's the same thing with roster construction. When you start building things around Pascal and Fred, everyone has to fit into them. And the pieces around them don't fit them, and they don't fit them. And that's why this whole thing doesn't work. Now let's talk about the 10 types of defenders. I'll give you an example for each. The first type of defender, and I think this is the most obvious type of defender and the one that often wins Defensive Player of the Years and is often, lauded and celebrated as a great defender, and those are rim protectors. People like Roy Hibbert, Rob Williams, these guys are rim protectors. Rudy Gobert. The second type, and I don't think much needs to be said about rim protectors, right? It's fairly obvious. The second type, and I want to just express that this is my own opinion. This is not borrowed from anywhere, and much like everything else, or almost everything else on this channel, this is an original take. So you can take this to the water cooler tomorrow and sound really, really smart and, know that no one in the history of the world has ever said what I'm saying right now before, because this is completely new. I have seen 3 types of defenders. I've seen 5 types of defenders. I'm breaking it down to 10. And hopefully it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, I'll fall flat on my face and you can tell me why I'm wrong and I will learn. Right? Let's move on. Number 2, utility knives. I call them utility knives. When I talk about utility knives, I'm talking OG Anunoby, Scottie Pippen. That's what a utility knife is. Utility knives are guys who do just about everything at a super great level, but don't do anything at the most exceptional level. But they can. The general value of a utility knife is the versatility. They can switch down, switch up, they can guard in a pinch, they can switch around in terms of their defensive role. They're generally very capable defenders all around. They're usually wings, but they can be bigger guards and they can be smaller bigs as well. I think that Draymond Green is also a utility knife, despite sometimes being a 5 for the Golden State Warriors. I think he can pick up a point guard sometimes. When he was younger, he definitely could pick up some bursty point guards and bother them. I think these types of defenders are increasingly more valuable in the way the NBA is played now. Number 3, on-ball stoppers. A great example of an on-ball stopper is Jeff Doughton, the Raptors' very own. I think Michael Jordan was also a great on-ball stopper. Gary Payton, Drew Holiday, Marcus Smart. I think these are all great on-ball stoppers. On-ball stoppers are just incredibly great at pressuring the basketball and staying close to their man. Now, I don't think that the way the game is played and the way the game is officiated, that there are really very many players, if any players, who can guard people one-on-one. But if there are players who can guard players one-on-one, people like Davion Mitchell, that's supposed to be his big strength, right? Davion Mitchell is a very small guard. He was older prospect, but the big appeal of him is he's an on-ball defender. Cason Wallace's build is a bit of an on-ball defender as well in terms of 2023 prospects. Number 4, weak side helpers. I don't think this only applies to shot blockers, but there are some players who are just exceptionally great at covering ground and reacting to someone else getting beat. And I liken players like Jonathan Isaac and Giannis Antetokounmpo as weak side helpers. I think this is a valuable player type. I think it's a great type of player to have off your bench. I think Christian Koloko, Precious Achiuwa, sometimes Scotty Barnes. I think these guys can all become really decent weak side helpers. It can also be a guard who's exceptionally good at digging, but they have to be able to cover a lot of ground. Giannis considers himself the best help defender in the NBA. I think another term for help defender would be a weak side defender. You can also interchangeably call it a help defender. Number 6, disruptors. I consider Scotty Barnes a disruptor, but I also consider Andre Iguodala a disruptor. Please do not accuse me of comparing Scotty Barnes to Andre Iguodala. I do not think they are comparable players. However, I do believe that disruptors have unique length, size, positional versatility, and have a way of making ball handlers uncomfortable. They may not always be very effective, but they do tend to draw some pretty favorable matchups. Not favorable matchups, they draw tough matchups on a nightly basis. They can be exceptionally difficult to score on. They just screw up the rhythm of the offensive player. And at the end of the day, that is really what you're aiming for, because every defensive possession is meant to be an attempt to make whatever shot the offense takes a little less efficient than the one they would like to take. And that's really what it is. So if it's a contested 2, you want it to be a tight contest. If it is, if it's a 3, you want it to be a 3 with a hand in the face. Everything there is like nothing easy. And I think that disruptors can be very valuable, especially off the bench as energy guys, but also in the starting lineup. I think it's just really great to have these guys. Number 7, hustle. Consider them hustlers. I wanted to avoid saying hustlers, so I just left it at hustle. I think it's just what Gary Trent is, right? Or was prior to last year. These are people that just, for one reason or another, they're just annoying. They poke the ball, they swipe at it. I think, you could probably argue that they dive for loose balls, they throw the ball off of you, they kick the ball. They're just annoying. They'll give you hard fouls, maybe. They do have a purpose. They muck things up. They make things a little bit difficult. Number 8, the box and post defender. I think you could probably argue that Luka Doncic is this type of defender. Usually a strong base, decent length, good size, someone who can bother players in the post and can box out defensive rebounds. Obviously, no defensive possession is completed without grabbing a rebound. And so, we might look at players like Enes Kanter, or you might look at even someone like a Steven Adams, and you might say, well, Steven Adams can't switch out to point guards, and Steven Adams may not be very good at navigating screens, but Steven Adams is really, really good at guarding the post, and he's really good at gobbling up defensive rebounds, and he's also good at boxing out. You can also look at someone like Jakob Poeltl. I think Nikola Jokic, does a decent job. Karl-Anthony Towns is a great example. Karl-Anthony Towns is no one's idea of a good defender in space, but if you put him in the post and you try to post him up, he is going to do a fairly commendable job. Now, the ninth type of defender is a screen navigator, something Scotty Barnes really struggled with, something Cason Wallace also occasionally struggles with, and that is screen navigation. Can't think off the top of my head which Raptors are really great at navigating screens. I think OG Anunoby is decent at it. But I think that with the number of horn sets and pick and roll and all the stuff that's coming in, Spain pick and roll into the NBA, and how often teams go to this, the ability to mobilize yourself and to be flexible enough and agile enough to be going through screens and around screens is a really big skill set to have. And in a pinch, I think this can make you a bit of a specialist off. But ideally, you would want every player to be decent at screen navigation. Naturally, bigger players are going to have a difficult time navigating screens because they're bigger, and smaller players and twitchy players might have an easier time. Flexible players will have an easier time. Quicker players who have great lateral quickness. People who react to things very quickly. People who are physical. There's a lot of things that go into screen navigation in the NBA, but I think that they are very valuable. 10 is, and the final, is a stretch and recovery. How is this any different from weak side helpers? I think weak side helpers is more of an inside thing. Stretch and recovery is more of an outside thing. And I think that with the number of times that teams collapse into the paint and then have to quickly chase out to a three-point shooter and contest a shot, I think that this is a new defensive type in the NBA. And I think Chris Boucher is a really good example of this. Someone who can just hustle really quickly and cover a tremendous amount of ground. And because of his long strides and his long wingspan, and I think that someone like this could, if he's not already one of the better ones in the NBA, I think he can develop into one. And so the goal, I believe, of any defense, if you're a smart coach, is to put 5 players, 5 defenders on the court, and forget who's a good defender, bad defender, because I don't even believe in the term. Really, what you're looking at is to put 5 defenders on the court who complement each other the same way that 5 offensive players you would put on the court that complement each other. You wouldn't put 5 guys who can't shoot on the court together, right? But every player who can't shoot isn't a bum. You wouldn't put 5 guys who exclusively shoot from the left corner on the court together, right? We can agree that that might be a little bit redundant. If you want to see a great offensive drill, go check out a 6-minute video with Ettore Messina on YouTube. It's incredible, and it's just them teaching offense, and everything is quick. It's a 0.5. And one thing you notice is like into the paint, out, into the paint, out, relocate, out, space, corner, out. And it's so dizzying. Watch it for 4 minutes. Watch any team do that for 4 minutes and try to tell me who's going to take the shot. It's honestly confusing. It's why the Sacramento Kings and Denver Nuggets and teams like this are successful. It's why the Golden State Warriors are successful. It's not easy to stop. But it works because Draymond Green and Steph Curry are very different players. And Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins have very different skill sets. Basketball is a team sport. You cannot put 5 players who are identical to each other on the court and expect, well, this is a really great type of player. I would really love to see a team with like 5 Giannis Antetokounmpos lose in a playoff series and people lose their minds because you just can't have 5 of those guys. You will fail. Yeah, obviously, you think about it and you're like, how could a team with 5 Giannis Antetokounmpos lose? My question is, how the hell do they score? You need different pieces to work together. So the question of who is who in your defensive scheme is a really important thing. And I think that this may also provide a little bit of, wait a second, to people who are so quick to say Gary Trent Jr. needs to go. Because he doesn't. He can fit at least 2 of these defensive archetypes. And Scotty can fit 2 or 3 of these defensive archetypes. And Christian Koloko can fit 2 or 3 of these. No one is just one. Well, maybe someone is just one, but most people on the Raptors, most players on the Raptors are at least two. Some are three. Maybe someone like OG, you could argue he does a little bit of the rim protection. He's clearly one of the best utility knives in the NBA. He's decent as an on-ball stopper. He's a decent weak side helper. I forgot about system defenders. That was the fifth one, and I completely glossed over it. My bad. This is a terrible podcast. I apologize. The fifth defender, which is a system defender, and that was Fred VanVleet. The example of a system defender is someone who basically operates within your system and within your scheme and can be initiated within that scheme to provide help down low, and they're just really smart. I think that Scottie Pippen with the Blazers was a great system defender. He would draw charges. I think Kyle Lowry today is a great system defender. He's not someone who can pressure on the ball the way he used to, can't navigate screens the way he used to. He can't jump up and block shots the way he used to. He's still a half decent guy in the post if he gets matched down with a bigger player. But honestly, he's just a really heady defender. He's a system defender. Like, he's a guy who can actively, direct traffic. He can tell guys where to be. He's just smart. And I guess a different word for a system defender would just be a really smart defender. And Fred VanVleet is that. He's very smart. He always knows where players are supposed to be. He can communicate. He can bark out orders. He can sort of see things before they're happening. That's a system defender. Anyways, I think that the Raptors have too much of a good thing, and too much of a good thing is a bad thing. If you eat ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you will develop diabetes. Eat it once a week. It's a great treat. So the question then becomes, what needs to go and what needs to stay? I think the Raptors need to open themselves up to different types of players. There are some different types of players on this team, but it seems like a lot of players on this team have a very, very similar set of strengths and weaknesses, don't they? A lot of players questionable shooters. A lot of players are questionable ball handlers. A lot of players have a lot of length. There's nothing wrong with length. Length is not in itself divorced from shooting. It does, however, make it harder to shoot when you have long arms and big hands. And if you're a team that only drafts people with long arms and big hands, man, you're going to have some trouble with shooting. And I'm not saying that every single player with long arms and big hands has trouble shooting. Kevin Durant's a great shooter. He has a 7'4" wingspan. But generally, on average, it tends to be that players with shorter arms, there's just there's less place for things to go wrong. So maybe it's not okay to just dismiss someone like Keontae George because he doesn't have great wingspan, or Jordan Hawkins. You can dismiss him for a whole bunch of other reasons, but Rafael Barlow seems to think that Keontae George has a top 13 guarantee. I disagree completely, but nevertheless, he believes it. So, and he knows a lot, and he's plugged in. So maybe the Raptors will consider going against type and draft Keontae George, as I have an aneurysm on a live. Maybe. In terms of defense, I think the Raptors have a lot of intriguing pieces that have a strong reputation around the NBA, but don't be so quick to say Gary Trent Jr. can't come back because he's a bad defender, because I think that if you put him in a right situation and you get a coach who gets buy-in from him, because defense is effort is chemistry. You have to understand health and chemistry are going to have a really big role in how well someone like Gary Trent Jr. is going to be able to play on defense. And if he's just not bought in mentally to the game plan, maybe he's not going to have the same impact on defense that he did the previous year. Just for the record, he was not a great defender in either year. I just think that there was some slippage this year. You know where else there was slippage? Pascal Siakam. You know who else slipped? Fred VanVleet. You know who else slipped? Scotty Barnes. They all had slippage on defense. Every single player in the starting lineup was worse defensively this year. So it might be a chemistry thing. It might be a minutes thing. It might be the fact these guys are playing 40 minutes a night. That could be it, right? There's a lot of things into it. We are closing in on, 5:46. And we are an hour and 4 minutes into this live, and I didn't want it to go over an hour, so let me close off. I hope this has been an interesting live for you, but maybe it hasn't been. For our 251st episode, I wanted to be lucid. I wanted to be clear. I wanted to have a point, and I wanted it to count. I didn't want it to just be a live where I talk shit. Clearly, I didn't care too much about the views, because if I had, I probably wouldn't have started at 4:40 in the morning. But I had this sort of burst of inspiration where I was talking to Vince. We are talking about, potentially a podcast, a type of podcast extending from this channel, like a show, where we do like on Friday or something at 2 p.m., Friday at 2 p.m., this show on Masai basketball. And it could be this thing. And we got to talking about just my role in all of this, Maybe I was talking about it a little bit. People seem to think that I have a lot to do with the fact that the fan base turned on Fred VanVleet. People seem to think that I have a lot of apologizing to do for how I talked about Pascal Siakam in the previous year. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that I got carried away. That I will admit. I don't always come off as a very likable person. I probably don't come off as very likable to you right now, to be honest. I do some dog sitting in my building for one of my neighbors. She's a very lovely lady. She's really, really just an amazing person. And her dog adores me, man. Adores me, this dog. And I love this dog. And she told me yesterday, she said, Robert, I told my husband, this is a person that I've never seen this guy smile, ever. Like, what's wrong with him? That's an impression. But then she also capped that off by saying, as I've observed you over the years, like, I just think that you're such a fantastic person. I don't think that it was malicious, and I hope that's clear. But if it hurts some people and if it bothers some people, I understand that too. Nobody wants to go on the internet. Nobody wants to watch a team struggle. It's a team you care about. Go on the internet, watch a guy basically shit on that team. Nobody wants that. I wasn't trying to piss on your parade. I wasn't trying to be a bad dude. I wasn't trying to be toxic. I really just wanted it to stop, because if you really think about it, I like way more players on this team that I dislike. Way more. I disliked like 2 or 3 players last year. I liked 14 of them. Is it my problem necessarily that two of those 3 guys played a lot? Not really. I try to be more balanced, but I understand that people who initially tuned into this channel tuned in for stats, numbers, and then suddenly it became all about bashing Fred and Pascal and talking shit about this offense and how Nick Nurse needs to go and Pascal Siakam's not a superstar and Fred VanVleet's padding his stats. Well, where have we arrived as a fan base? All of those things are true. Like, I have no regrets about what I felt. I have many regrets about how I went about expressing them. So my commitment to you, if you are a diehard Masai basketball follower, if you're someone who's new, if you're someone who has kind of been on the edge about like, am I in or am I out with this guy? My only promise to you is this year that despite what some people might think, there is no agenda on my part to be negative. I don't want to be negative. I want to be positive about this team. I want this team to win. I want the same thing. I hope if you're here that you want. I don't want drama. I don't want to be talking shit about the media. I don't, but if you're going to call out my favorite player for having work ethic issues, yeah, we might have an issue. I need to be better about how I address that issue. I'm not super proud about how I handled everything last year, but I am super proud that I spoke the truth and that I had the courage to say what I felt, even though it was deeply unpopular and I got a lot of shit back for it. So I will try to be a better person. I would try to be more patient with people in these lives. Sometimes when people don't agree with me, sometimes I got a little bit heated, and I agree with that. And I hopefully will get better as I mature. I am 35 years old, and most people don't think that someone who's 35 has any excuse to be immature. And that's simply just not true. We're all growing. Hopefully, we're all learning, and we can learn together. I hope this live has been informative, interesting, deep, insightful, whatever. My hopefully my not hopefully my takeaway from this is really that whether Pascal Siakam comes back, whether OG comes back, whether Gary comes back, Fred comes back, I don't know who's going to be back, and I'm not pretending to know who will definitely be back. But I do want to just throw this out there as a word of caution to the Raptors front office. If somehow this gets to you, if someone out there knows somebody in the Raptors front office, like that's in a decision making, just clip this part and send it to them. If you are going into next week and the week after that with the understanding that because Nick Nurse is gone, that Fred VanVleet is going to be a fundamentally different leader, and that Pascal Siakam is suddenly going to morph into, a franchise guy, then I think that you're wrong. And I would like you to deeply consider that any notion of these guys coming back, I don't care about the money. It's not my money. It's not your money. As long as it works within the cap, whatever. Contracts can be traded. The one caveat, the one sticking point, the one agreement the one big discussion that I would have with both those players before agreeing to anything long term is that this is not your team. You are not a franchise player, and you are not a leader. You can be a leader, but you are not the leader. There are other leaders in this organization, and we will try to build them up, because we do not believe that in 3 years, where you two have had seismic leaps in your leadership responsibilities, that we have necessarily had a good track record. Because let's be honest, Nick Nurse won a championship as a head coach. It's not all him. The difference was he had leaders. And he kind of got used to coaching that way, didn't he? Because he's always coached that way. Going back to the Iowa Energy, you can go right back. Nick Nurse has always been a guy who allows the players to do what he wants within lines. As long as you're playing defense and as long as you're adhering to 2 or 3 offensive principles, it's a free-for-all. Let's do what you want. Well, that's how you coach in the G League. That is how you coach in the G League. And that's how you coach a veteran team. That's how you coach a team, There was a point that I wanted to make that I completely forgot to make, and I guess it'll be my closing thought. Even if I would have wished that it was not my closing thought, I cannot go this entire live and then not say this. A lot has been made of the Memphis Grizzlies and Ja Morant. I still really love Ja Morant. I know it's hard to stand by this guy right now after 2 situations with this gun and his behavior. The Memphis Grizzlies got a lot of negative attention this past year, not only because of Ja, but because of Dylan Brooks and the Shannon Sharp thing, and they're always talking shit to people and whatever. But say what you want about that team. They loved each other. They played together. They stayed together. They played for each other. That's the Darko effect. I do believe that he has a large part to do with that. I also believe that Taylor Jenkins is like that. I believe that they have good people in that organization, like, Desmond Beind, Ja Morant, etc. I do believe Ja Morant is a good person despite making bad mistakes. I do believe it's possible to be a good person who makes a mistake. I also believe it's perfectly possible to be a bad person on your best behavior all the time. Okay. But I do not believe that Ja Morant is a bad person. I will never in my life believe that about him. I have seen so much, heard so much about him. That dude has a good heart. And I remember when he won Most Improved Player for the 2nd year, and he gave that trophy to Desmond Bane. Y'all remember that clip? It went viral. It was like this box, and he calls him down, and he just gives him the award. And he said, they didn't give it to you, but I'm giving it to you because you deserve it. That is a leader. So he may not do all the right things off the court, and I'm not here to judge that. We all have our shit. But I do want to say that is the spirit that you want from a leader. Will A saying this guy definitely on Real GM with the FVB hate. I do not have a Real GM account. I was banned from Real GM when I was a teenager, and I have never made a burner account. I've never tried to make another account. And despite the number of times that people have accused me of having a Real GM account, I have never posted on that site. But I will tell you that on occasion, I definitely do read that board, and I have a very firm grasp on how people feel about me on that board, and I can't control that. Anyway, have a good day, y'all. Enjoy. And I guess I did not drink all my coffee, so now I will drink some more coffee as I go work on an edit. I hope this was a decent live. I have no idea how it went. I don't think I'll know how it went until I listen to it later on. I had some stuff to say. The overwhelming message of this, hopefully, apart from the, hey, Raptors, please, please, please don't do this and don't bring these guys back as leaders. And if you do bring them back, please make sure to clarify that it's not their team. The other overwhelming message of this was thank you, because this channel has meant a lot to me. It has meant a lot to me, and these lives have meant a lot to me, and I love seeing this grow, and it's grown a lot over the last year. On June 15th, it's June 15th today. June 15th, a year ago, I think we had 200 subs. We're north of 5,400 now. That's crazy to me. Like, that's just absolutely insane. It succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. So thank you. We're going to keep pushing this. I would like to get to more structured content, get back to videos. I promise I will. There's so many. I promise I will. And I haven't. And I've been really bad about that. And I want to get better with it. But I wanted to get this off my chest. It feels cathartic. It feels like closure. This is like closure, because I feel like I'm putting a bookend, hopefully, on a year from hell for the Raptors. I hope we can move along. I realize there are certain people that, I beefed with, or that I maybe went too far with, or said something to, or I said something about their favorite player, and they can never forgive it. And I get it. And, we can just move on. But to those of you who, can see past that and move on, bygones be bygones, my only word to you is I will be better this year for sure. All right. Take care, yo, and have a good day. Oh, and make sure to hit subscribe and like this video on your way out. It is totally free, and I would super appreciate it. Take care, guys.